They kept sending their water into my yard, so eventually, I sent it right back. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just one of those weird summer things. You know how storms hit hard and fast out here, like the sky's dumping everything it's got all at once, and then 5 minutes later it's sunny again like nothing happened. But the ground remembers. My yard definitely did. It started as a puddle. Just a wide, lazy puddle sitting near the back edge of my lawn, right up against the fence line. Nothing dramatic, nothing worth complaining about. I figured the soil was just saturated. We'd had a rough week of storms, and this was just the earth catching up with itself. It dried out by the next day, so I didn't think twice. Then the next storm came. Same spot, same puddle, except this time it stuck around longer. Not by much, maybe 2 days, but long enough that I noticed. I remember standing there with my coffee that morning, looking at it through the kitchen window, thinking, that's new. Still didn't worry about it. You don't jump to conclusions over a puddle. But then came the third storm, and that's when things shifted. The puddle turned into something else. Less like a shallow inconvenience, more like a small, stubborn pool that refused to go away. 3 full days before it even started to shrink. The grass underneath turned soft, almost spongy, like stepping on a wet sponge that never quite bounced back. And that's when I noticed the house behind mine. Now, that place had been under renovation for a couple of months. I hadn't paid much attention before. Contractor trucks coming and going, the usual noise, but suddenly it all clicked into focus. Fresh concrete patio, bright as a blank canvas, brand new gutters lining the roof, landscaping that looked like it had been dropped in straight from a catalog. And then there was the pipe. Long, white, sticking straight out from the back wall of their house, angled slightly downward, and pointed directly at my yard like it had a purpose. Like it knew exactly where it wanted to go. I remember squinting at it, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe the contractor hadn't finished yet. That's what I told myself. Then the next storm hit, and I saw it. I was standing in my kitchen, same spot as before, coffee in hand, watching the rain come down in sheets, when suddenly, there it was, a steady stream of water shooting out of that pipe. Not trickling, not dripping, but blasting, like someone had turned on a hose full force. And it wasn't just draining. It was aiming. All that rainwater from their clean, perfectly sloped patio rushed into that pipe, and then got fired straight into my backyard like it had been rerouted with intention. My grass didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, that same patch near the fence was flooded again, only this time faster, deeper. Their yard? Dry, perfectly usable. Mine, turning into a sponge. I stood there longer than I should have, just watching it happen, not even angry yet, just confused, like my brain hadn't caught up to what I was seeing. There's something strange about realizing, in real time, that a problem you thought was natural isn't. That someone made it. The next morning, I walked over. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who starts things. I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially neighbors. You don't get to choose who lives behind your fence, so you try to keep things smooth, keep things polite. The owner answered the door. Mid-40s, maybe, clean cut, the kind of guy who looks like he's always just stepped out of a meeting. Hey, I said, keeping it light. I think your drainage might be pushing water into my yard. He didn't even hesitate. Oh, yeah, he said, like it was already been explained somewhere. Contractor set that up. It's standard. Water flows downhill anyway, right? I gave a small nod, because technically, he wasn't wrong. But it didn't sit right. Sure, I said, but this isn't exactly natural flow. That pipe. He shrugged, cutting me off just enough to make a point without sounding rude. If there's an issue, you should probably talk to the contractor. He handled all that. And just like that, the conversation ended. No apology. No curiosity. Just deflection. I stood there for a second after he closed the door, staring at the clean lines of his renovated patio, the perfect edges, the way everything on his side looked so controlled. And then I looked back at my yard. Soft. Wet. Uneven. I went home, but I couldn't shake that feeling, like something small had just shifted into something bigger. So I called the contractor. Took a couple tries to get him on the phone, but when I did, I explained the situation, kept it calm, kept it simple. I wasn't accusing anyone, just asking questions. He listened, or at least pretended to. Then he said something that stuck with me longer than anything else. Our setup meets code on their property, he said, flat and confident. Once the water leaves their boundary, it's just surface flow. Surface flow. I repeated it in my head after the call ended. Because on paper, it sounded clean, almost logical. But in reality, it felt like a loophole. A way to make a problem disappear on one side by pushing it onto someone else. The next storm came a few days later. And this time, I didn't just watch. I paid attention. I saw how fast the water came out of that pipe, how it hit the ground, spread, and then settled right where my yard dipped ever so slightly near the fence. I saw how long it stayed, not hours, not even a day, almost a full week before the ground felt normal again. That's when the mosquitoes showed up. That's when the smell started, damp, earthy, just enough to remind you something wasn't right. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to fix itself. Something had to change. Something had to change, but I wasn't interested in making a scene. I've lived in that house long enough to know how these things usually go. One complaint turns into two. Then suddenly you're that neighbor, the difficult one, the guy people avoid at the mailbox. And honestly, part of me kept thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just bad luck stacking on top of bad weather. But then the next storm rolled through, and that little voice in my head finally went quiet. Because this time, I didn't just notice the water, I studied it. I stood by the back window again, phone in hand, and recorded everything. The rain hit first, heavy and loud against the roof, then the gutters filled, and a few seconds later, that pipe came alive. A thick stream shot out, steady and forceful, carving a path into my lawn like it had done this 100 times before. I zoomed in, tracked the flow, watched it pool, spread, settle. Then I walked outside, yes, in the rain, and filmed the aftermath up close. The ground was already giving way beneath my boots, soft and unstable. I took photos from different angles, made sure you could see the pipe in the background, the direction of flow, the way the water collected right at the fence line. Dates, times, duration. I started logging everything. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I had a feeling I might have to. That same night, I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and started digging into local ordinances. Zoning rules, drainage codes, property guidelines, all the boring stuff nobody reads until they have to. And buried in there, between pages of legal language and diagrams, I found something interesting. You can let water flow naturally onto a neighboring property, but you can't concentrate it and then discharge it directly. That distinction, natural versus directed, that was the line. And that pipe? That pipe was doing the choosing. I leaned back in my chair, just staring at the screen for a minute, letting it sink in. Because suddenly, this wasn't just annoying, it was preventable, fixable, maybe even enforceable. But still, I didn't file a complaint. Not yet. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized, if I escalated things now, it would turn into a process. Inspections, reports, back and forth emails, maybe even hearings. Weeks, maybe months of frustration. And all the while my yard would still be a swamp. So I asked myself a different question. What if I didn't fight the water? What if I just redirected it? That thought sat with me for a couple days. And once it settled in, it started to grow. I went out back one afternoon, no rain, just quiet, and really looked at the land for the first time. Not casually, not in passing, but intentionally. The slope of my yard, the way it dipped near the fence, the subtle angle running along the property line. And then I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. Their yard wasn't perfectly level either. Just beyond the fence, slightly to the right, there was a corner that sat lower than the rest. Not dramatically lower, but enough. Enough that if water ever made its way there, it wouldn't leave quickly. I stood there, hands on my hips, connecting the dots. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I smiled. Not out of spite, just clarity. A few days later, I called a landscaper. His name was Victor, mid-50s, sun-worn skin, the kind of guy who could read a yard like a map. He showed up in an old pickup, stepped out, took one look at the back of my property, and said, "You've got a drainage problem." I laughed a little. "That obvious?" He nodded, already walking the perimeter. "Water tells you everything if you know where to look." I explained the situation, kept it neutral, no finger-pointing, just facts. Showed him the videos, the photos, the notes I'd been keeping. He watched quietly, arms crossed. Then he looked over at the fence, and beyond it. He said, more to himself than to me. "What are you thinking?" I asked. He turned back, crouched down, and ran his hand through the soil near the fence line. "You don't need to stop the water," he said. "You just need to guide it." That word again. Guide. Not block. Not fight. Not confront. Guide. He stood up and pointed along the back edge of my yard. We build a berm here. Nothing crazy, just a raised strip, maybe a foot high, 2 feet wide. Dress it up nice so it looks intentional. Plants, stone edging, make it part of the landscape. And that'll fix it? I asked. He gave a small shrug. It'll change the conversation. I liked that answer more than I expected. So we got to work. Over the next few days, Victor and his crew transformed that back fence line into something that looked planned. Intentional, like it had always been there. A clean row of stone edging, filled with hardy plants that could handle both sun and saturation. But underneath all that, a compacted soil ridge, reinforced with gravel at the core. A quiet barrier. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew what to look for. And I didn't say a word to my neighbor. Not before. Not during. Not after. Because technically, I wasn't doing anything to them. I was just improving my yard. The next storm didn't take long to arrive. I remember the air feeling heavy that day, like it was building towards something. Clouds rolled in fast, dark and thick, and by late afternoon, the rain started, slow at first, then heavier, then relentless. I went to my usual spot by the kitchen window, phone in hand again, waiting. It didn't take long. The gutters filled, the flow built, and then, right on cue, that pipe fired up. Same as always. Same force, same direction, like nothing had changed. Except everything had. The water shot out, hit the ground, and then met the berm. And instead of pushing straight into my lawn, it stopped. Not completely, not dramatically, just enough. Enough to lose its momentum. Enough to spread. I watched as the stream flattened, split, and started moving sideways along the fence instead of forward into my yard. It was subtle at first, almost easy to miss, but then it became obvious. The pooling never happened. The sponge effect gone. The water kept moving, hugging the fence line, following the slight natural slope I'd noticed days earlier, inching its way toward that lower corner, toward their side. I didn't step outside this time. I just stood there, watching it unfold. Not with anger, not with triumph, just quiet satisfaction. Because for the first time since this started, my yard was dry. For the first time in weeks, my yard was dry. And I didn't realize how much that mattered until I stepped outside the next morning. The grass felt normal again under my feet, firm, springy, like it used to. No sinking, no squishing sounds, no muddy patches clinging to your shoes. Just a yard. My yard. The way it was supposed to be. I stood there for a while longer than I needed to, hands in my pockets, just taking it in. There's something quietly satisfying about fixing a problem without making noise about it, like solving a puzzle nobody else even knew you were working on. But of course, it didn't end there. Because water doesn't disappear. It just goes somewhere else. It took about 2 more storms before the knock came. I remember it clearly. It was late afternoon, sky still gray from the earlier rain, the kind of light that makes everything feel a little heavier than usual. I was in the kitchen again, same place this whole story seems to orbit around, when I heard it. 3 knocks. Firm. Measured. Not aggressive, but not casual either. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. He stood there in the same clean-cut way as before, but something had shifted. You could see it in his posture, less confident, maybe a little tense. Like someone who had just discovered a problem they didn't expect and didn't quite know how to handle. "Hey," he said. "Hey." I replied, calm, neutral. He hesitated for a second, then glanced past me toward the backyard, like he was confirming something in his head before saying it out loud. "So, my side yard's been getting pretty muddy lately," he said. "Like really soggy. Wasn't like that before." I leaned slightly against the doorframe, not defensive, not inviting, just steady. "Yeah," I said. He nodded. "Yeah. I was wondering if you changed something? Back there." There it was. Not an accusation. Not quite a complaint. But close. I let a small pause sit between us. Not long enough to be awkward. Just enough to make the moment feel real. Then I said, "I did some landscaping. Just improved drainage on my side. The water was pooling pretty bad before." All true. Every word of it. He studied my face for a second, like he was trying to read between the lines, trying to figure out if there was something more behind what I said. But there wasn't. At least, nothing he could point to. He exhaled slowly, shifting his weight. "Yeah, I mean, I get that. It's just, now it seems like all that water's ending up on my side. That corner near the fence, it's turning into mud." I nodded once, like I was hearing new information. Huh, I said. That's weird. And for a second, just a second, you could see the frustration flicker across his face. Not anger. Not yet. Just that quiet realization that the situation had changed, and he wasn't the one in control of it anymore. He looked back toward the fence again, then back at me. So what do we do about it? That question hung in the air. Because now, finally, we were in the same place. I wasn't the guy with the problem anymore. We both were. I straightened up a little, crossed my arms loosely, not confrontational, just present. Well, I said, when I looked into it before, there are a few standard ways to handle runoff properly, like a dry well or a soakaway system, even a rain garden, something that keeps the water on the property where it falls. I watched his reaction carefully. No defensiveness, no denial, just processing. Yeah, he said after a moment. The contractor mentioned something like that, I think. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Oh yeah. He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. I might have gone with the simpler option at the time. Simpler. That was one way to put it. Cheaper, faster, someone else's problem. But I didn't say that. Instead, I just nodded. Makes sense, I said. Until it doesn't. That landed. Not hard, but enough. We stood there for a few seconds in silence. The kind that isn't uncomfortable, just honest. Two people looking at the same situation from opposite sides, finally meeting in the middle. So if I fix that, he said, gesturing vaguely toward his backyard, it should solve the issue? I gave a small shrug. It should help a lot. Another pause. Then he nodded once, more to himself than to me. All right, he said. I'll take care of it. And just like that, the tension that had been building for weeks started to unwind. No argument. No raised voices. No legal letters. Just a shift. A week later, I saw the crew. Different guys this time, not the original contractor. They showed up early, marked out a section of his yard, and started digging. Over the next couple days, they installed a proper underground system, gravel pit, perforated piping, the whole setup designed to absorb and disperse water slowly into the soil. I watched from a distance, not out of curiosity, just quiet awareness. Because this wasn't about winning. It never really was. It was about balance. After that, the storms came and went like they always do. Heavy, sudden, unpredictable. But this time, everything behaved. His yard drained the way it should. Mine stayed dry. And the fence between us. Just a fence again. No longer a fault line. Now, here's the part one keep thinking about. I never filed that complaint. I never called the city. I never forced the issue. I just changed my side of things. And somehow, that was enough to make him change his. But was it the right way to handle it? That's the question. Because if I'm being honest, part of me wonders what would have happened if I hadn't built that berm. If I'd just let my yard flood, documented everything, and gone the official route. Would it have been faster? Cleaner? More correct? Or would it have turned into something bigger, something uglier? And then there's the other side of it. Did I solve a problem? Or did I just send it back where it came from? I didn't damage anything. I didn't break any rules. But I definitely made sure the inconvenience wasn't mine anymore. So where's the line? Between standing up for yourself and quietly pushing the problem onto someone else. I still don't have a perfect answer for that. But I do know this. Sometimes, people don't understand a problem until they feel it. And once they do, solutions tend to show up real fast. So I'm curious. What would you have done? Would you have gone straight to the city, filed a complaint, forced a fix from the start? Or handled it the way I did, no confrontation, just a quiet redirection? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever had a neighbor situation like this, where things started small and turned into something bigger, I'd love to hear how it played out. Because honestly, these are the stories nobody really talks about. But somehow, we all end up living them.